What is up, everybody? Jeremy Ice and Fire here, and welcome back to another Song of Ice and Fire History and Lore video. And on today's topic, we are going to be taking a look at the life of Aerys II Targaryen, or more commonly known as the Mad King, and taking a look at what exactly made him go mad in the first place. From his early days as a promising young king with many dreams and aspirations to make the realm a better place, all the way up to the Defiance of Duskendale and Robert's Rebellion and everything in between, and find out just exactly what was the final straw that broke the dragon's back. Aerys II Targaryen was born in 244 AC to parents Jaehaerys II Targaryen and Shiara Targaryen, and he reigned from 262 AC till the time of his death in 283 AC. But Aerys wasn't always the Mad King that we have come to know at the end of Robert's Rebellion and the beginning of our story, A Game of Thrones. In his earlier years, before he was king, Aerys was kind, charming, and had much prospects for the future. And many thought that the realm was going to be in really good hands once Aerys did take over as king. Even Aerys himself declared upon his coronation that one day he would be known as the greatest king in the history of the Seven Kingdoms. During Aerys' youth, he met and befriended a young Tywin Lannister, and the two would go on to become fast friends. Aerys himself would even go on to serve as a squire during the War for the Nine Penny Kings and the last Blackfire Rebellion down in the Stepstones, after which he was knighted for his time in the field, and he chose none other than his good friend Tywin Lannister to perform the knighting ceremony for him. Then, after the death of Jaehaerys II in 262 AC, Aerys ascended the Iron Throne and officially became Aerys II Targaryen and the last of the Targaryen monarchs. The beginning of Aerys' reign showed much promise to start off. As soon as he ascended the throne, he took swift action in replacing many of the prominent officials at court, most of which had been very old men at the time, including bringing on his friend Sir Tywin Lannister, as Aerys was very impressed with Tywin's ruthlessness at the time, as Tywin has just finished putting down a rebellion against House Lannister. Aerys started off as a very active king in the beginning of his rule, and boasted of many grand plans and designs that he wished to accomplish during his reign, including conquering the Stepstones and adding it to the Seven Kingdoms, building a second wall up north, and even wanted to create an entire city out of pure marble, as he really disliked the stench of King's Landing. And even during his early years, Aerys showed some small, subtle signs that could potentially point to a greater problem going forward and his potential madness. But regardless of all of Aerys II's wild plans, the realm really begun to prosper under his reign, and that is widely thanks to his very clever hand of the king, Tywin Lannister. Tywin quickly built up a reputation for being ruthless, smart, calculating, and someone you do not want to trifle with, which eventually would end up leading to a little bit of a strain between the friendship between Aerys and Tywin, as Aerys would start to become very jealous that Tywin was getting a lot of the credit for a lot of the good deeds that the realm was prospering under. Aerys got so jealous to the point where he even cut out Sir Ilyn Payne's tongue when he heard the knight boasting that it was really Tywin that was the true ruler of the Seven Kingdoms and not Aerys. And from there on, the strain between Tywin and Aerys only continued to get worse. And as the years went on, Aerys II continued to become a little bit more unhinged, trapped in a loveless marriage with his wife Rhaella, and suffering many stillborns and the loss of many children. You could clearly start to see a little bit of that Targaryen madness start to boil to the surface where Aerys was concerned. Until we get to the Defiance of Duskendale, which I think was the final straw that broke the dragon's back. Duskendale was a port city in the Blackwater Bay that had once been the center of trade in all of the Blackwater Bay. But over the years, as King's Landing started to become more bigger and more popular, its port quickly took over as the new center of trade in all of the Blackwater Bay, which severely diminished the holdings of Duskendale's port city. Wanting to halt the decline of his once great house, the Lord of Duskendale at the time, Lord Dennis Darkland, desired to win a charter for House Duskendale, similar to the charter that Dorne had been granted about a century prior. But the Hand of the King, Tywin Lannister, quickly refused this proposal, as he knew that it would only end up hurting the port city of King's Landing that was ever growing at the time. After his petition was denied, the Lord of Duskendale, Dennis Darklyn, hatched another plot. Now, at this point in time, it was widely known that the relationship between the Hand of the King and Aerys II Targaryen was very strained and was not going well, and Lord Darklyn sought to exploit the rift between the two. Which brings us to the Defiance of Duskendale. In 277 AC, Lord Dennis Darklyn had stopped paying his taxes to the crown to demonstrate his anger. Already knowing that the relationship between Aerys II and his hand was very strained at the time, Lord Darklyn invited Aerys II to Duskendale to discuss the terms directly. Tywin, of course, urged the king not to consider it, but Aerys wanted to be seen as independent from Tywin, and the true ruler of the Seven Kingdoms did not heed his advice, and proceeded to travel to Duskendale with only a single Kingsguardman. Upon Aerys' arrival at Duskendale, Lord Darklyn ordered his men to kill the Kingsguard and anyone else who dared to defend their king, and took Aerys II prisoner. Aerys was shoved roughly, stripped of his royal raiment, and even struck, and a young squire even came along and pulled his beard. Aerys would go on to be held captive for up to 6 months in the Duskendale dungeon, where Lord only knows what happened to his person. But one thing we do know is that Aerys was never quite the same after Duskendale. But after 6 months in captivity, and with Lord Tywin refusing to even parley with Dennis Darklyn until he gave up the king, Tywin was quickly running out of patience and getting ready to storm the castle. Until a member of Aerys II's Kingsguard, Sir Barristan Selmy, offered to rescue the king himself single-handedly, to which Lord Tywin could not refuse such a valiant offer. At night, disguised as a simple beggar, Barristan Selmy scaled the walls unseen, making his way into the Dun Fort, where he made his way down to the dungeons where Aerys II was being held, killed 2 guardsmen without being seen, and made his way out with the king. But just as he was making his escape, an alarm was raised. But fortunately, Barristan Selmy managed to steal a horse and get right outside of the city gates just as they closed, but not before he took an arrow to the chest, saving his king. Whatever happened down in those dungeons definitely changed Aerys forever. Whatever little bit of Targaryen madness he was displaying before the Duskendale incident, it was clear that it had broken the king fully, spiritually and physically. Aerys' madness continued to grow, where his paranoia continued to won out, where he saw enemies lurking in every shadow. As for the Lord of Duskendale, Lord Dennis Darklyn, and his family, King Aerys II's revenge would be swift and absolute. With his leverage gone, Lord Darklyn begged for mercy, to which Aerys II had none. He ordered the deaths of Dennis and his immediate family, as well as all of his uncles, aunts, and any distant relatives that he may have had. As far as the squire that pulled the king's beard, which was a squire of House Hollard, the king also put their entire family to the sword as well, with the exception of young Dauntus Hollard, who Sir Barristan Selmy personally asked that the king spare. But in the end, it was Lord Darklyn's wife, the Lady Sorella, who many believe was responsible for the entire defiance of Duskendale to begin with, having convinced her husband to rebel in the first place, that received the worst of Aerys' vengeance, having both her tongue and her womanly parts torn out before being burnt alive. And many believe this is where King Aerys first developed his obsession with fire, as he would go on to burn many more victims in the future. And it was even said that Aerys could only become aroused after burning someone alive. Overall, I believe whatever happened to Aerys during that 6-month period that he spent in the Duskendale dungeon really ended up breaking whatever little sanity he had left. He had already been displaying some signs of Targaryen madness here and there, but certainly nothing to this extent. After he returned from Duskendale, he was not the same Aerys ever again. He would become increasingly paranoid. He saw enemies in every corner, in every shadow. He would not let anyone near him with a sword except for his Kingsguard, and would refuse to leave the Red Keep for years at a time. Aerys' madness would continue to decline over the years up until the point where a young Robert Baratheon would rise up and destroy the Targaryen dynasty, becoming the next king of the Seven Kingdoms. And Aerys would go on to meet his end right at the end of Robert's rebellion after being killed by a member of his own Kingsguard, Sir Jaime Lannister, the son of Tywin Lannister, putting an end to the reign of terror that the Mad King begun all those years ago. But that is going to do it for us today. Help me combat that YouTube algorithm by hitting that like and leaving a comment on your way out. And don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell for notifications so you don't miss any of our future content. And as always, I want to thank everybody out there for watching, and we will see you on the next one.